Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen stories. In this video, a Karen called the police on me because I kicked her trespassing brats out of my private property. Let's dive right into the video to see what happened. There was nothing more relaxing for me than spending the Sunday afternoon by the pool with the soft spring breeze caressing my face. Now that the summer was approaching, the weather was in that middle point of not being too cold but not being too warm either. Just a perfect amount of crisp and refreshing. I was sitting next to the pool in the back of my house, enjoying the calmness of it all. I lived alone and had some family and friends come usually during the weekends, but not today. Today I was all alone, so I could just sit on a deck chair with a glass of cold iced tea and a new book I was just starting. By the end of that afternoon, my glass of iced tea lay empty next to me, and the book I was reading now had a bookmark in the middle of it. I decided to go take a shower and make myself some dinner, but when I stood up and walked towards the house, a stinging pain broke through the sole of my foot and made me exhale a muffled scream of pain. I had stepped onto something, a branch I thought at first, but upon further inspection I lifted my foot to reveal that the guilt of this sudden pain was a little green toy soldier that was sitting on the floor by itself. I took the toy in my hands and looked around in search of an explanation. I did not have kids and my friends' kids had not come in a while, but then it occurred to me that maybe one of the kids in the neighborhood thought throwing the little man over my fence was a good idea. I went to take a bath and make dinner and didn't think too much about it later on until next Friday, I must say. I was working in my office going over some documents I had to transcribe when I heard yelling and laughter coming from the bottom floor. I dismissed the sound as the windows were closed and I assumed it was the kids just down the street, but the yelling and noise would not let me concentrate on the documents, so I took a peek outside and to my surprise, there were kids inside my pool. I had to do a double take because I had no idea who these kids were or what they were doing inside my house. I was baffled and immediately came downstairs. "Hey kids," I said to them as they stopped playing and splashing the water around. "You're not allowed to be in here, this is my house," I said with a calm voice, thinking maybe they had gotten confused. "But Mommy said we could swim," the little one said, who didn't look much older than 7 years, with a pout. "No, this is my pool and you cannot swim here without my permission and without supervision. An accident could happen too, so get out of the pool and tell that to your mom," I tried to reply. The little kid didn't seem pleased with the idea of getting out of the pool, but the bigger one, about 10 years old, grabbed him and muffled something about talking to their mom as they got out of the pool. "And hey kids, I believe this is yours," I said, remembering the little green soldier I had found the week before. To my further surprise, it did belong to them, which could only mean that they had done this before without my permission and when I was not in the house. But hopefully, without that warning, they wouldn't do it again. How hopeful and naive I was. Well, it turns out that same Sunday, the kids were back inside my pool. This time my calmness had disappeared as I couldn't believe their mother would allow them to do this again after I told them to get out. "Kids, get out of my pool," I said, yelling as I sprinted to the backyard. "Mom said we could use it," the bigger kid replied, and I took a deep breath and got out of the house. It was time to stop discussing this with literal children and take the matter to the responsible one for this, their mother. Talking to my friend Charles earlier in the week, he had mentioned it must have been the new neighbors that had just moved in, as I had never seen these people in my life and I had lived in that house for the past 10 years. So I knew exactly where they lived, a couple of houses down the street. I knocked on the door furiously and a woman opened with a confused face and wide eyes. "You are?" she asked as if she was insulted that I was interrupting her TV show that was going on in the background. "Well miss, I'm your neighbor and your kids are in my pool on private property without any permission and I'd already given them a warning. They are trespassing," I tried to explain to the woman, who I thought would act reasonably and get her kids back home, but boy was I wrong. She just looked at me with a superiority stare and let out a chuckle. "I'm the new neighbor. We are allowed to use the neighborhood commodities whenever we want to," she said as if she was entitled to the use of my private pool. "Ma'am, that's not a neighborhood commodity. That's private property," I said with a serious tone. "Well, I don't see any signs," she replied, looking at me up and down with a raised eyebrow. "If I see your kids in my pool ever again, I'm gonna call the cops," I told her as I went back to my house. I did not even wait until Monday to call a friend of mine to install security cameras around the house, as well as clear and big signs that read "No trespassing," in case she wanted to avoid the law next time something happened, and then I just waited. A week went by and nothing happened, so I imagined the signs had finally scared them off, but it turns out they had just gone camping during the weekend, and on Sunday again they were there, the kids splashing and yelling in my pool. I knew going to talk to their mother would not be any good, and if I got them out of my pool, they would just come back the next day, so I just called the police as I said I would. I filed a report citing the ongoing trespassing, and waiting for the police to show up at her house, I could only imagine her face the moment they told her that what she was doing was wrong. I thought they might be there already in this very moment, but my thoughts were interrupted by a knock on my door. I stood up a little startled by the noise, and my confusion only grew when I heard the person on the other side say it was the police. I opened the door to the two officers standing there. One had a notepad in his hand and read, "Are you Mr. Levington?" He asked, and I nodded, "Yes. Your neighbor is accusing you, Mr. Levington, of threatening and attacking her kids. Do you understand how serious that is?" The stern-sounding officer told me, and I could not believe what I was hearing coming out of his lips. I've never done such a thing. Her kids had been trespassing on my property over and over again, even after I told her so, but I had never done anything like that. "I have security cameras all over," I said, opening the door so the officers could step in. We all went to my office to check the security cameras as I was explaining the ongoing situation with her kids inside my pool without any supervision. Trespassing even after I told her this was private property. I was explaining these things when an image in the security camera caught my attention. "That's her!" I yelled as the video showed Karen also trespassing on my property and using the pool as well. Not once, not twice, but multiple days during the week after I left early in the morning to go to work. I couldn't believe how shameless she was. Her attempt to report me to the police backfired, and she ended up with a citation for filing a false police report on top of the charges with ongoing trespassing. While a little jail time was possible for her, I assume she followed her lawyer's advice and pleaded guilty to the charges. As she didn't have any previous records, she was just sentenced to a criminal record and to do some community service. Either way, I was able to enjoy the peace of my home again without any children or annoying Karens in the middle of my pool. By the way, that Saturday afternoon I could finally relax, enjoying my pool in the backyard, knowing very well that Karen was doing some community service while I was here with my glass of iced tea and my almost finished book. And the next one is titled, "My Mom Thinks a Court Will Give Her My House." So I bought a small starter home during the housing market crash completely by myself. I lived there for the better part of a decade before buying a larger home with my now husband. My parents really wanted to live there because it was small and easy to maintain. They have foreclosured in the past, so no way would they be capable of someone giving them a mortgage. Also, my dad is retired and my mom does not work. They wanted to rent from me. For a discounted rent, they paid off the mortgage, let's say 50k, with an over six-figure inheritance my parents got. A lease was written explaining that it was a prepayment of rent, and their rent would be only the taxes and insurance, and they would pay $350 per month. Basically only going up when taxes and insurance were going up too. We signed the lease with all the other typical stuff in it and had it notarized, and that's how it's been for a while now. So to be clear, I'm not making a dime on this house. I recently told them the rent would go up by $3, yes, $3, because of a slight increase in the insurance, and my mother lost her mind, claiming I'm a money-hungry bitch, that she was gonna rip out everything she did, the garden and other cosmetic changes that I owe her, and I cannot evict her because it's her house. She's not responsible for the insurance, lease says otherwise. Insurance has not been raised in a decade. Look at the effin' lumber prices. I'm trying to make her pay my personal homeowner's insurance too. A court will show me that and give her my house. We have a notarized lease, they are listed as tenants, I'm the only one on the deed. My father demanded the bills, 0 balls this man has, to see if I'm ripping them off. P.S. This house is a commutable distance from Manhattan, so a studio apartment around here is like $1,500. This is a house with a large yard for their dog. I can easily get $2,000 for this house even before they moved in. I sent them copies of the taxes and insurance showing only their address. P.S. I'm charging them discounted taxes. You get a discount for paying in full 90 days early. I told them to add and divide by 12 and told my mom to talk to a lawyer so they can slap them straight. I guess my father agreed with me because now she is divorcing my father. Update to the story. First I wanna thank everyone. I was mainly just venting because I was very upset after the exchange and have been dealing with some health issues which my parents know about, so it is just a range of emotions right now. I keep getting a lot of the same questions. They've lived there for 4 years now. My mom has always been entitled and an alcoholic. Weekends and summers were spent with family. My aunt admitted when I was an adult it was to keep us from being around the alcohol. I mainly did this for my father so he can get a chance to retire after having heart surgery when he worked a physically demanding job for 36 years. They asked to rent the house and pay it off as a prepayment of mortgage, so the only big bill monthly was their health insurance. I had a few others interested in renting my house. I did not ask them for this. They did not co-sign on the mortgage or help with the down payment. Their name is not on my house and deed. There have been rent increases in the past due to the taxes and insurance going up, and there was never an issue before. My husband's dad unfortunately passed away without getting to enjoy his retirement, a big reason why my husband told my dad that he needs to retire and enjoy life a little. And his inheritance helped pay the down payment on our new house. My mom has a history of putting crap on me, and $3 is, I guess, my line in the sand. I started paying $200 per week after I graduated high school until I moved out at 20. I worked about 65 hours per week on top of school to do this. And yes, shockingly, they foreclosed when I moved out. I stupidly put her on my phone plan and basically paid her phone for 2 years until the contract ended because she only paid me for 3 months out of those 2 years. She promised money for my wedding and never delivered. Also, they did not pay for college. They stopped paying for clothes and school expenses when I was 16 because I had a job. I know this is all a red flag parade, but I trusted my dad more than her, I guess, and I thought I was doing a good thing. I also want to keep this house because I love it and want to move back one day. It's just too small for us as a young family, or allow my child to live there when they go to college and want to have fun without parents hanging around or racking up dorm costs. Also, she threatens divorce all the time. I doubt she'll actually go through with it though. Update to the story. I finally have an update for you guys, so all aboard the Disappointment Express. To back up, after the divorce comment, they are not in fact getting a divorce. They went and celebrated their anniversary at a casino. I didn't speak to them for a week, and this past weekend I tried to speak to my father and get an apology, hoping he would be in a better frame of mind, but surprise, he wasn't. He doubled down with the BS, saying that they didn't realize all the stuff I put in the lease, that my house was uninhabitable when they moved in. It wasn't, and that they never would have put work into the house if they were just renters, etc. I asked them to specify, and they said stuff about the garage screen door, the shed roof. My husband replaced 2/3 of it with my dad's help. My dad did the other 1/3, and by God, the hose leaked. That in no way affects the livability of the house, but in the words of my lawyer, and you agreed to live there in its original condition, buddy, so that's on you, just like not reading the lease. My dad went on to just say all these things they were doing for me and not acknowledging a damn thing I was doing for them. At that point, I said some not so nice things, including the alcohol-induced dementia everyone mentioned. They wanted to know if they were still gonna be able to take my son to the fair. Not a fat chance in hell though. I told him that I didn't want either one of them around me or my family until they stopped being delusional and to decide to pay the increase or GTFO. I then cried when I got off the phone, and my husband was upset with all of this. Cut to today, my mother called me asking what needed to be done to resolve this because not being able to see my son was upsetting them. I told them they needed to apologize for what they called me and that they were out of line. Well, you guys, they were scammed. My parents got scammed, and that's what this was all about. In my area, homeowners get daily calls and texts and letters from people wanting to buy their house. It's not new in this market. I've even told them that these letters are trash. Well, my parents were getting calls from people saying they were going to be renting the house. They acted like they were representing me. Someone also showed up to their house and was being very pushy about trying to see my mom in the house. This all happened before I mentioned the rent increase. So when my mom heard rent increase, she thought these phone calls and this person was real. Like I was gonna raise the rent to something they couldn't afford and force them out. This was before I told them it was $3, but even after they thought I was throwing them out. I asked them why they didn't ask me, and they said they were scared and had no place to go. I explained to them that that's not even how it works. I cannot rent a place with tenants. There's a whole legal process and they should know this. They apologized for how they acted, everything they said, and were embarrassed. They were even more embarrassed that they believed this person and are officially old people that fell for a scammer because they thought they were smarter than that. They had not given them money or information yet. I told them they were probably setting them up for it. Scammers will pretend to be renting a house and take people's first/last and security, and when the new tenants show up, the house is already occupied and they are screwed out of the money, or pretend that they need money to let them keep living in the house. I have no idea why they believe and fell for this person, or why they never asked me in the first place, since I don't and would not hire a representative for my own house. Their cameras were off when they came, but they're gonna file a police report anyway. I told them to call the cops next time to file for harassment and trespassing if these people call or show up again. I got my apology from both parents. I explained everything in the lease and why it was legally written that way. I explained to them that I cannot throw them out on the street on a whim, and as long as they pay the minimum bills to live there, aka taxes and insurance, I was gonna keep my end of the deal. So I guess that's my update. They are not getting evicted for now, but I might have to start monitoring them more closely to see if they fall for other dumb stuff. PSA, a lot of us seem to have boomer parents, so I want to make you all aware of something. My parents have Medicare, which in the great old US of A means that if they have larger medical expense, they ain't paying for anything until all their personal assets are utilized. This means draining bank accounts, taking property, and even requesting back gifts from up to 5 years ago. So for example, your mom falls and breaks a hip and winds up in a rehab, your mom gave you 20k for a new roof a few years ago, the government will demand that money before they pay for the rehab. They can take their savings and demand property in their name sold to pay for it. They legally cannot touch their car, but that's it. I know this from personal experience with a grandparent, and all of you should too, to help protect your parents. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So my father was one of those guys who was really big on buying and selling property. Not real estate exactly, just empty land, and then the buyers would build various things on it. Both commercial and residential areas, and when he died, everything got left to me. That included one plot of land in a very wealthy commercial area. I did not follow in my dad's footsteps and didn't know anything about that kind of business. What I did know was that I had a good job and I did not really need extra money from a sale or a huge plot of land for myself. If my tone is not a clear giveaway, I never had a good relationship with my father, so the fact that I got left anything was a surprise. I did not like how in this line of work so many people seem to get hurt or screwed over. It took me a while, but I figured out what I could do with that plot of land that would make me feel good about it. There was an issue in my area with too many orphaned children and the homes for them being overcrowded. I was gonna build a home on the land and then give it to that organization. Giving them the land alone would not help much, so I called and searched around for people that would volunteer time or supplies in order to build the place. That kind of thing takes a lot of time, and that meant I was away from the property and letting it sit for far too long. By the time I had most things settled and went to see the land again, there was already a house on it. Well, house might be the wrong word for what it was. The place looked like a mini mansion and I had no clue how it happened. I went to the town to try and find out from the public record information and saw that it was being claimed to be owned by the guy who lived in the other mini mansion right next door. I went to go and speak to him. I could tell when he opened his door that he had the same look to him as my father. That look that said, "Leave me alone unless I'm gonna make money from the conversation." Neighbor, what do you want from me? Me, hey, I'm OP. I owned the property next door and couldn't help but notice that you built a house there. Neighbor, the lot was empty for a long time. Nobody was using it and it could have been making somebody money. So now I can sell it. Me, it was not your land to build on. Neighbor, look kid, I'm a lawyer and from your clothes I can tell that you don't have a name in this city. It was abandoned land, so I took it in order to preserve the neighborhood. Now get the hell off my property. Friendly guy I was dealing with. He was right, I didn't have some big name or fancy law degree like him. I knew that what he did was illegal though, and I spent the next week contacting lawyers to find one that was willing to go up against him for stealing my property. Many refused because they didn't want to be on the opposite side as him. Finally, I found a group of lawyers willing to help me that I could afford. It took time until the paperwork went through, and we were actually able to get into a courtroom with a judge to argue the case. The neighbor was telling a different story than the one he told me at his front door. He said that he owned the property and before my father died he had purchased the land. He showed fake evidence of a check trying to prove that he paid for it. I got everything from my father, including his bank account, which showed there was no check deposit. I demanded to see a bank statement that the check cleared and that he couldn't provide one. He did not try and claim the land was abandoned again, which I learned from my lawyers was never gonna work anyway. With his only plan falling apart, my lawyers started to ask him questions. What I was trying to do was not hidden, and people knew what my overall goal was for that property. After enough pushing, they finally got him to admit his feeling about an orphanage being built. Not saying it was why he did it, but claiming that it would ruin the area and drive prices down. That basically nobody wanted to hear the noise a house full of kids would bring. He was smart with his wording to make sure he didn't flat out say that that was the reason. I could see why he was considered a good lawyer. The judge was more interested in the fact that he lied and tried to manufacture evidence in his favor. Apparently, a lawyer lying to a judge is a little different than a regular person. They can get fined or put in jail depending on how serious it was. A lawyer could lose his license, and that was exactly what happened to him. From what I heard, all of his past cases needed to be gone through again to see if he lied or tried to fake something for his clients. It was a bigger mess than I would have expected. Hell, I just wanted him to return the property to me. He was in a world of trouble, but the issue still remained that there was a house he owned on land that I owned, putting us kind of in a stalemate where neither one of us could do anything with it. What some people don't know is that even though the land he built on was mine, he still was the owner of said house. It can get complicated, and even my lawyers had a hard time trying to explain things to me. I got my revenge though, because in order to clean up his mess and image, he needed to do a lot of work. One thing that was recommended of him was donating to charity. They could not make him give up the house, but the way he was advised gave him a strong push to do so. He signed the deed to the house over to the charity organization, and then I signed them over the deed to the land. The neighbor got to keep his house, so now he is forced not only to have a home full of kids next door to him, but them living in a $2 million house that he planned on selling and making a profit for. It was incredible because I got to see inside the house after the charity got it and let me walk through it. It turns out that the neighbor went all out and had an indoor pool and a small movie theater. These kids were gonna have a good home to live in until they could find another permanent home. The way this guy reminded me of my father, it felt like I was getting some kind of karmic revenge. That I got to not only do something my dad would have hated, but find a guy with the same ideals as him. All I know is that I hope the kids play nice and loud so the neighbor will never forget what a colossal ass he was to try and steal the land away from homeless kids. And here, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. And the next one is a petty revenge story. Many years ago, my former partner's sister, her kids and her redneck lug of a husband came to stay with us. The husband was retired military, a big fat lug of a guy who grunted like some kind of gorilla, super macho and obnoxious. He would take every opportunity to get his point across that he was a real man and us gay guys were not. My partner made a nice breakfast for the whole group one morning and then set up a tub in the sink so everyone could quickly wash their own dishes. We have no dishwasher. When the brother-in-law was finished eating, he carried his plate into the kitchen, tossed it onto the counter and sneered, "I ain't washing my own dish," and then walked out. A few minutes later, he went to take a shower while everyone else, except me, went outside. It was an old apartment with bad plumbing, so while he was in the shower, I stood in the kitchen and turned the hot and cold water on and off throughout his entire shower. I could hear him in there yelping like a little girl as he alternately got hit by scalding hot and then freezing water. When he finished and came out of the bathroom, he said, "Whoa, that shower temperature of yours is really crazy." I just smiled and said, "Oh yeah, sometimes it's like that." And the next one is another petty revenge story because I just cannot get enough of this. Yesterday I was running to the grocery store to pick up an item from the deli counter that I needed to make dinner. The line was long, so I waited for about 10 minutes. A woman and her husband saw the line, decided they didn't want to wait to put in their veggie tray order for the weekend, 5 days away, and jumped in front of me right as it was my turn. I protested, politely saying, "I'm sorry, but I was actually next." They looked at me and turned back to the counter and started their order. I don't think the worker hurt me, but they certainly did. It really upset me. Why didn't I stick up for myself better? Well, my time is valuable too. Why didn't I see this coming and prevent it? Well, I was really stewing on it. In fact, I made a promise to myself to not let people treat me with disrespect and not do anything about it. I don't know why people look at me and know I won't say or do anything. So about an hour later, it dawned on me. I stood next to them while they placed their order for a vegetable tray. I heard their name, phone number, and when they planned to pick it up. I love vegetables, so this Saturday I'm going to arrive an hour before their scheduled pickup time and get myself a carefully curated veggie tray. I will still pay for it since it's not prepaid, so no crime committed. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.